Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Lowy, the Acting Director of NCI, and first, I want to thank you for coming to this session because just like when you are boarding an airline, we know you have many choices, and so we are glad that you selected ours, and I hope that at the end of the 45 minutes you will feel that maybe you have reached your destination, or at least you're going in the right direction. I'm really impressed by how far we have come, but I also recognize how far we still have to go. And although I realize that we are living through a period of uncertainty, I want to assure all of you that NCI is continuing to strongly support cancer research. And in the next few minutes, I want to outline for you my perspective on cancer research and the role of the NCI. I really am very encouraged by the widespread optimism of the ability of the research to dramatically transform the cancer landscape, and this optimism extends to patients, advocates, scientists, healthcare providers, and many others. However, as I will try to outline in the next few minutes, sustained progress will require a balanced approach that covers a wide range of research areas with various timelines before they yield clinically meaningful results. And really, I have this of the long-term, intermediate term, and short-term with approximate duration because I think it's really important for us not just to think about are we doing basic research, prevention, et cetera, but how long will our research take before it might be applicable to patients, fully recognizing that a large part of our research will be contributing to understanding without not necessarily having a direct impact on clinical activities, but knowing that overall, as a result of this research, that we will be improving the situation for patients. It's really important to me that we remain open to new ideas, new ways of thinking, and new ways of doing business. And this includes welcoming a progressively expanding role for non-cancer biologists. For example, engineers such as Angela Belcher, who presented yesterday at the plenary session, and mathematicians, but also importantly, patient advocates. And one of the things that I'm really pleased about with the Blue Ribbon panel and its recommendations is how the recommendations are patient-focused, and in addition, how the members of the panel included, importantly, members who were patient advocates. So I'd like to talk about where we are right now before getting into how I imagine we might be trying to balance things. If you look on the left side in the panel, you can appreciate how over the last 20 years there has been almost a 25% decrease in cancer mortality rates. Clearly, this is overall very good news. But I must point out that there are important disparities with certain underrepresented minorities and other groups. For example, people in rural areas who have not benefited to the same degree as these others. And I've talked in the past about the importance of trying to address and redress these disparities, whether they are attributable to biology, lifestyle, or healthcare access and utilization. I should also point out that the improvement in mortality rate is not just with adults with cancer, but also includes children with cancer whose mortality rates have actually gone down faster. But thinking about children with cancer, we recognize first that any child who gets cancer and succumbs to that disease is one child too many. But in addition, as a result of being able to treat and cure so many children who get cancer now, we need to be cognizant of the long-term side effects. And this is an issue that is really front and center as we think about children with cancer. 10 days ago, I visited St. Jude Children's Hospital in Memphis, and I was impressed simultaneously by the incredible research that they are doing, while at the same time, they clearly recognize how important this issue of long-term toxicity is. Now, in the middle panel, it really tells you that although we can perhaps take some measure of satisfaction that as a result of long-term research in prevention, screening, and treatment, that mortality rates have gone down, cancer is still responsible for 1 in 4 deaths in the United States. And this represents, if you will, 600,000 people per year, or if you want to think about it on a daily census basis, about 1,500 people dying every day from this disease. And what this tells us is really highlighted on the right side of the slide, which is that we must redouble our efforts. And these efforts have to go not in just one area, but in multiple areas. Long term, we want to further decrease cancer mortality rates, but this will be established first by preventing cancer, have fewer people develop cancer. In addition, to try to detect cancers earlier when they are most treatable, but to make sure that when we are doing that, that the benefits of the early detection far outweigh the harms. And then finally, to develop effective and less toxic treatments for reasons that should be obvious based on what I was saying. So let's think about how we want to move forward with the cancer research program and how to try to have it be balanced. I would first address the issue of long-term research and point out that because of the very long timeline, that this is an area where almost entirely it will be funded in the public sector, because the private sector, whether it is for-profit or philanthropy, usually has a much shorter turnaround time before they see a return on investment. For us, we are extraordinarily fortunate. Our return on investment is actually discovery, improving our understanding of the causes of cancer, how cancer comes about, and ultimately then having benefits to patients. But this really is a very important and core part of what we do, that is long-term planning. So training a diverse workforce. The Cancer Moonshot really focuses on accelerating research in areas that are poised for such acceleration. And because training is a long-term process, it's not an integral part of the Cancer Moonshot, but it certainly is an absolutely critical component of what NCI supports. And this training is really a critical aspect of the regular appropriation that, for those of you who heard Senator Blunt yesterday, or perhaps Congressman Yoder today, they are focused on trying to make sure that the NIH gets an appropriation in the next few months for FY17. I should point out that when we think about training the diverse workforce, we are thinking both about people who are born in the United States as well as people who come from outside the United States who have enriched the research process so much. For example, Nellie Poliak, who is the main scientific organizer for this year's program, is such an individual. We also need to think about basic research, because this is research that is going to fill the pipeline for future years. And if we don't strongly support basic research, when we see ourselves several years from now, we won't have those breakthrough discoveries that we all know we are looking forward to. And one of the really incredible aspects about those discoveries, we don't know what they are going to be. And that is part of the real fun of doing science, and very important as we think about supporting science. We want to support risky research, but feasible research. And research project grants are really the core of this activity. And I want to use this slide to make several points. Over the last 4 years, the number of awards that we have made has increased substantially. On the left axis is the number of awards that NCI has made of Type 1 and Type 2 for the R01 awards. And what I hope you can appreciate is that we've gone from around 600 to about 700 awards during that time period. And because we tend to divide pristine investigator-initiated research as so-called unsolicited research, that is shown on the blue line, and the orange line shows you the combination of unsolicited and solicited, so that you can appreciate the increase really has, most of the awards are unsolicited awards, and they have continued to go up. What's not shown on this slide is that in FY16, 24% of the new awards went to investigators who had never had a major award from the NIH, not just the NCI, but NIH wide. And in addition, that the funding that we have gone for really has gone up concomitantly. During this period, it's gone up about 25% in terms of the new awards, but each year we need then to add a substantial amount of our resources to fund the out years of those awards. And this is something that we try very hard to do every year, but it is a substantial commitment from a financial perspective. Turning now to intermediate term research, a fair amount of that research is translational. And so this is research where fundamental discoveries have perhaps identified new targets, but we don't have inhibitors for those targets or other kinds of intervention. And so we must support translational research in that area. Obviously, when there is at some point going to be a handoff between the public sector funding and private sector development. And what the NCI tries to do is to have close interactions with the pharmaceutical and biotech industry so that we know what they are working on, so that what we do complements what they're doing. We're not trying to compete with them by focusing on the same targets, but instead are trying to do more risky research that, if it is successful, actually can help drive research, the translational research in that area in the private sector, not just development in the public sector. Another important area for the intermediate term is the study of patient cohorts. And we have a number of different cohorts that we follow. Let me just tell you about two. One is the African American breast cancer cohort that was funded last year. This is an amalgamation of a number of different cohorts of African American women with the plan to sequence about 20 million women who of African American ancestry who had breast cancer and where we have clinical information about treatment and outcomes, and compare them to 20,000 African American women who have not had breast cancer. And we are looking forward to gaining insight into what accounts for some women developing breast cancer and others not. In addition, we have a lot of breast cancer research that is genomically oriented for Caucasian women, but much less for African American women. And so once the genomic information is available for the African American women, it will be possible to compare the mutations that the African American women get to the mutations that the Caucasian women get, and perhaps get some insight into what accounts for the much higher incidence of triple-negative breast cancer in African American women compared to that of Caucasian women, as well as trying to address many other incidents. A second kind of cohort that I would like to mention is the Children's Cancer Survival Study. And this is supported by NIH and carried out at St. Jude Hospital through Greg Armstrong, who is the principal investigator. And what this does is that it follows the children as they grow to see what happens in terms of long-term side effects. And the good news is that the children who were treated, let's say 30 years ago, had a much higher rate of long-term serious side effects than the children who were treated 15 years ago. But the bad news is that the children who were treated 15 years ago still have a lot of side effects. And so we need to redouble our efforts to make sure that the new interventions that we have not only are more efficacious, but also less toxic. And part of the Cancer Moonshot with the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations is oriented in that direction. Turning to special initiatives, I just like to call out the RAS initiative. This was started 3.5 years ago. It is a hub and spoke model conducted at where the hub is at the Frederick National Laboratory for Cancer Research in Frederick, Maryland. And there are a cadre of scientists working there under the leadership of Frank McCormick from UC San Francisco. And the long-term goal of that study is to develop successful interventions against patients with mutant KRAS. And that is focused on mutant KRAS because first, although we've known that mutant KRAS occurs in about 1/3 of cancers, we've known this for close to 30 years, we haven't been successful at developing such interventions. And as many of you are aware, when we think about what we do with other kinds of inhibitors, they may account for a few percent of cancer patients. But if we could be successful in dealing with mutant KRAS, in one fell swoop, we would really have made a major advance because so many patients with serious cancer have mutant KRAS. Just to give you one example, about 95% of pancreatic cancer have mutant KRAS, and it's one of the reasons why mutant KRAS has such a why pancreatic cancer has such a poor prognosis, and why it is so difficult to treat. So if we could really get over that threshold, it could have an enormous impact. The Frederick National Laboratory Advisory Committee reviewed the RAS program 6 months ago. This is a committee of extramural scientists, and they were very impressed by the progress that has been made, and they are strongly recommending renewal of the program. Yesterday, the RAS program was discussed, and I will tell you that although the room was not even in the convention center, it was in the Marriott. It was filled to overflowing because the RAS initiative really has galvanized the community to say, we need to make an assault on this problem. Will we be successful? I don't know. It's a high-risk problem because we've known about this issue for 30 years, and thus far we haven't been successful. But there is a lot of optimism that the improved understanding, developing technology, et cetera, and new assays for screening for RAS, et cetera, some of which were presented and discussed yesterday, have a lot of potential. So I also want to talk about the next program, which is the NCI Experimental Therapeutics Program, because it also is in the translational intermediate space. And this supports primarily academic researchers who have made fundamental discoveries identifying targets and would like to develop inhibitors against those targets. And this is a daunting task for people with relatively limited experience in actually trying to do translational research. And the vast majority of the targets are targets that the pharmaceutical and biotech industry are not yet attacking because they are felt to be too high risk or have other limitations. For example, targets that are oriented primarily towards children with cancer are not really lucrative targets because the size of the group is very small, and so there isn't the financial incentive that there would be, say, for lung cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, et cetera. So the next program supports these different areas, really going from target validation to candidate selection and to the beginning of clinical trials. And let me just, again, call out two of the many projects that are going on. In the preclinical development phase, Chi Dang from the University of Pennsylvania, he and his colleagues a number of years ago identified lactic dehydrogenase A as being upregulated in cancer and actually being an important contributor to the Warburg effect that is common to many cancers. And so he applied to the next program, and they have essentially screened candidates. They now have lead compounds that actually hit the target. They're learning more about what's the specific role of LDHA in this process, and then going on and doing secondary site lethality and asking what cooperates when you inhibit LDHA, what other genes cooperate with that, because it looks like just targeting one gene that's involved in the Warburg effect may not be sufficient. Again, this is risky research, but if it is successful, could have a substantial impact. Another area is the development of a MER kinase inhibitor that Shelley Earp and his colleagues at the University of North Carolina are developing, and that is more advanced. And they have identified inhibitors, and the MER kinase is not one of the ones that had been focused on by the pharmaceutical industry, in part because it is made by stromal cells rather than being made by tumor cells, but there is evidence that successful inhibition might be able to be useful as an intervention against certain lymphomas and leukemias. And so they're working on that and close to being able to start a clinical trial. Now let's get to the short-term areas. And the NCI formulary is something that was announced in January. Jim Dorshow, the Deputy Director for Clinical Research of NCI, really developed the formulary. And what it is, the goal is to essentially drastically shorten the amount of time that it takes to start a combination treatment clinical trial. And this is designed primarily for the NCI-designated cancer centers. And what it does is it makes upfront agreements between multiple pharmaceutical manufacturers to contribute their drugs so that if a cancer center wants to test more than several drugs from more than one company, the turnaround time should be very short, no more than 8 weeks, before the company says yes or no. And currently, there are 6 different companies that have made 16 agents available, but in the near future, we look forward to there being at least another 5 additional agreements with at least a doubling of the number of compounds that are available. Another important area which, through the Blue Ribbon Panel and other aspects, we are giving more attention to is implementation research. Implementation research is where there already is standard of care, but the utilization, uptake, and dissemination of that standard of care is really suboptimal. And the Blue Ribbon Panel called out 3 specific areas for highlighting. One is smoking cessation, and so we are planning to have the cancer centers compete for supplements to talk about smoking how they plan to effect smoking cessation, not just for people who don't have cancers, but focused on people with newly diagnosed cancer, because the data are really quite good that the outcome of patients with cancer can be improved if people stop smoking. Second area is HPV vaccination, which has been shown to be able to be highly protective. And in a country such as Australia, which is a high adopter country, the HPV types targeted by the vaccines have almost disappeared in Australia. In the United States, the uptake has been less than in Australia, and although there is evidence of a decrease in the prevalence of the HPV types targeted by the vaccines, we can do better, and it is an opportunity to prevent a large number of cancers, estimated more than 25,000 cancers in the United States if the vaccine were widely deployed. And I should also point out that worldwide, cervical cancer is the 3rd most common cancer of women, and close to 300,000 women die each year from this cancer. And NCI is involved in research, really trying to decrease the cost and increase the facilitation of being able to do this by testing whether a single dose of the vaccine might be sufficient. And this could help reduce cost and improve the logistics in the United States, but also worldwide. And then the 3rd area is colorectal cancer screening, where colorectal cancer screening has enormous potential for saving lives. But it is relatively underutilized. And once again, we plan to go out to cancer centers and others to ask, in your catchment area, how do you propose to increase colorectal cancer screening? And if your hypothesis is correct, how can it be made in a sustainable way so it can be disseminated? And I was at Meharry University in Atlanta last month, and there was discussion about the opportunities for African Americans to get screened for colorectal cancer. And what they were saying was that once you are eligible for Medicare, that there is relatively high uptake in the African American community. But we know that there's an increased incidence and mortality rate from colorectal cancer among African Americans, and they have, relatively speaking, difficulty getting access when they become 50 and should be having screening. And so this is a challenge that we need to redouble our efforts in. I'm pleased to say that Mike Caliguri, who is the incoming president of AACR, is going to make health disparities a centerpiece for his presidency, and I look forward to NCI and AACR be able to work even more closely than has been true up to now. Last, clinical trials networks. And I just want to call out, we have lots of different trials, but I just want to call out one trial now, which is the MATCH trial. And many of you have heard about the MATCH trial, paradigm shifting, et cetera, because instead of focusing on the tissue of origin of the tumor, it focuses on the molecular abnormality. But I'd like to point out another way in which it is paradigm shifting, which is that it is bringing the medication to the patient instead of the patient to the medication. And as a result of people recognizing that, this community of trial, it's just remarkable where the most volunteers to go into the trial have come. You can appreciate that in the dark brown, that there are patients from Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma. That's where the highest per capita uptake is of this trial. So it's truly a national trial. It is, in that sense, I think, very much paradigm shifting. And we're looking forward in the second half of this year actually being able to see some initial data about efficacy. So I've been really trying to tell you about my view of how we need to go forward, which is instead of just doing prevention, just doing screening, just doing treatment, just doing survivorship, just doing basic research, we should be thinking about how do we provide short-term support for patients, things that have relatively short turnaround time, our clinical research, implementation research, those kinds of activities. Intermediate research in terms of the cohorts, translational research, and other kinds of activities. And for the long term, making sure that we have an outstanding group of young investigators to follow those of us who, in the not-too-distant future, may no longer be involved in the research process, and to strongly support basic research so that there will be the fantastic advances that we all look forward to. And I'd like to end by essentially saying, where can each of us make the most impact? And for everyone here to think about what can they do? Where do they see their scientific curiosity leading them? I will tell you personally, my research career started in a virology lab when I was a medical student. And today, I am just as excited as I was when I had my first research success. What to me is the most exciting thing is to look at what everyone else has looked at and see what no one else has seen. But that is not necessarily what motivates everyone. I really was very impressed when I read a book by Robin Roberts, the Good Morning America host, talking about her myelodysplasia called Everybody's Got Something. And what she said multiple times in that book was, make your passion your purpose. And I know that I can count on all of you, because we are here because we want to take this terrible scourge that we cause cancer, and each in his and her own way make a contribution so that tomorrow it will be less of a problem, and with many tomorrows there will be much more improvement in terms of reduction of incidence of cancer, and for those who develop cancer, for the outlook, the outcome, and the quality of life to be much improved. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your comments and questions.